The Tall Trees region in the state of West Elizabeth is home to some of the most horrifying terrors within Red Dead Redemption 2. For example, there are extremely dangerous predators such as grizzly bears, wolves, and mountain lions, who will almost always attack their victims on sight. There are also extremely depraved and vicious roaming bands of criminal gangs, such as the Skinner Brothers, whose reign of terror features ambushing, brutally torturing, and savagely murdering their victims. Whether they're men, women, or children, the Skinner Brothers will scalp and skin them alive. However, there is also another vicious and roaming criminal gang that is very active within the Tall Trees region during this time, within the epilogue of Red Dead Redemption 2, that went under the proverbial radar of, and therefore escaped the attention of law enforcement. Dutch Van Der Linde and his new and emerging gang also made the Tall Trees region their home or base of operations, and it would be Dutch's gang, comprised of alienated and disgruntled Native Americans who held a deep disdain for both the government and especially the white man, that would eventually consolidate their complete control and influence over Tall Trees. These young men knew nothing but poverty, as their traditional way of life, land, and homes were stolen. And just like with those within the previous Van Der Linde gang or Dutch's boys, his recruits for his new gang were just as coerced and manipulated by the cunning and completely unhinged Van Der Linde. With these young men under Dutch's thumb, both willing and eager to do his bidding, they would kill for sport and lash out against the US government, and more importantly, civilization, with outright savagery. And it was this savagery which resulted in the massacre of the Blackwater Athletics Team. The disappearance of the Blackwater Athletics Team actually occurred in 1899, in Chapter 6. However, the mass grave can only be discovered within the epilogue, when playing as John Marston, in 1907. The bodies of the victims at the mass grave also appear to have not experienced any deterioration, nor have they been ravaged by wild animals and the elements. This is likely due to a developmental oversight and was glossed over, forgotten, or neglected in the frantic development of the game, somewhat similar to how Guarma and Mexico turned out. A news story regarding the disappearance can be read in the game's various newspapers, and the article contains a very interesting clue regarding the perpetrators. The article reads as follows: Blackwater Athletics Team missing. Friends fear they have been foully dealt with. Members of the Blackwater Athletic Club are still missing, and their friends and family are excited by the gravest fears. They were last seen leaving the north edge of town for a group athletics run and, although the most thorough search has been made for them, they cannot be found. Certain facts around their disappearance have given cause for suspicion. The affair has created a sensation in Blackwater and the surrounding community. They had departed on a run and had intended to return the same evening. Their friends are making a diligent search, and police in neighboring areas have been notified. At first, there were rumors they had been kidnapped by Indians. However, this appears to be false, as no tribes have engaged in theft of livestock or kidnapping in some years. The Blackwater Athletics Team were training for a competitive meet next month, and were expected to take top honors in fencing, wrestling, and baseball. The location of the mass grave containing the remains of the Blackwater Athletics Team can be found here in the game's epilogue, which of course takes place in 1907, deep in the heart of the Tall Trees region. People can't really be blamed for initially suspecting the Skinner brothers as being the perpetrators of the massacre of the Blackwater Athletics Team. After all, the Skinner brothers were terrorizing Tall Trees and the region's outskirts, savagely attacking, torturing, and murdering any visitors or civilians traveling through the region. However, the Blackwater Athletics Team disappeared in 1899, and according to Charles Smith, the Skinner brothers didn't arrive in Tall Trees until 1905. Furthermore, the Blackwater Athletics Team mass grave simply does not match nor meet the proverbial criteria of a signature Skinner Brothers atrocity. Skinner Brother atrocities showcase far more blood, gore, and depravity with scalped and skinned victims who've been shot multiple times with arrows, while there may also be the charred remains of bodies. In addition, the Skinner Brothers atrocities are much more ritualistic, or perhaps ceremonial in nature, featuring deliberate lines painted in particular patterns on the ground, around, and leading to the site of the atrocity. There is also a theory that Edmund Lowry Jr., a serial killer featured in A Stranger Mission, was responsible for the disappearance of the Blackwater Athletics Team. Lowry is a serial killer who drugs and brutally kills his victims, then displays their dismembered remains close to Valentine in New Hanover, northeast of Strawberry in West Elizabeth, and east of Braithwaite Manor in Lemoyne. Lowry, in this theory, drugs the athletics team and then has his way with them when they were unconscious. There's apparently more than one way Lowry did this, such as being a former disgruntled member of the team who was mocked and bullied, so he would have familiarity with them. So for instance, if the team was out on an evening run and came across Lowry, who just happened to be in the area in or around the outskirts of Tall Trees with enough water for the team, they would be completely fine with that situation and have a drink, no questions asked. Or perhaps Lowry somehow ambushed and overpowered the entire team. Furthermore, the Lowry theory proponents have also observed that the dismembered leg and two arms which formed a crude B at the mass grave match the dismembered limbs in Lowry's bloody lair, and that the painted hoods featuring a woman's appearance and makeup symbolizes Lowry's tepid and tumultuous relationship with his mother. First of all, both the Skinner brothers and the Murphy brood, the large inbred family which terrorizes Roanoke Ridge, also dismember their victims. Secondly, the dismembered limbs at the mass grave also match models of dismembered limbs at Skinner brothers camps. Third, if one isn't not relying on a what-if scenario, such as what if Edmund Lowry Jr. was a former disgruntled member of the Blackwater Athletics Team, then Lowry would have had to have stalked the athletics team for weeks, carrying out extraordinary reconnaissance in order to somehow learn that the team were going for a run that evening. In addition, Lowry would have had to ambush the entire team in or around Tall Trees, or would have been waiting for them in order to drug them. This is ridiculous, as there is no way that Lowry could have overpowered the team by himself. Plus, the athletic team would have been very suspicious if they came upon Lowry in the middle of nowhere. Finally, this decapitated and mutilated corpse in Lowry's lair at Lucky's cabin in New Hanover was also reused in a Skinner Brothers camp and at Beaver Hollow, the Murphy brood's hideout in Roanoke Ridge. So, according to the rationale of the Lowry theory proponents, if Lowry massacred the Blackwater Athletics Team, seeing as the same limbs from the mass grave are in his lair at Lucky's cabin, then Lowry is also a member of the Skinner brothers and the Murphy brood. If Lowry actually ventured into Tall Trees during this time, he very likely would have found himself the victim of the real perpetrators, especially considering that Lowry is also a white man. When the Blackwater Athletics Team went missing and was ultimately massacred in 1899, tensions and violence between Native Americans and the US government were very high. There were constant infringements and violations of the terms of the treaties between the various tribes and the federal government, which really intensifies during Chapter 6, again, when the athletics team went missing. For instance, the US Army claims possession of the Wapiti tribe's horses, and therefore it's considered by several young natives, most prominently eagle flies, to be an act of war as they believe their tribe could starve. Leviticus Cornwall's oil company receives permission from the federal government to drill for oil on the Wapiti reservation. Soldiers destroyed a ceremonial site and stole a sacred ceremonial pipe. And Colonel Favors withholds vaccines from the federal government, which were intended for the Wapiti tribe. Northeast of the Tall Trees region, just across the Upper Montana River, lies Fort Riggs, an abandoned holding camp which was operated by the US Army. The Army held Native Americans at Fort Riggs in the most brutal and cruel conditions imaginable. There is a random encounter within the game which spawns as early as Chapter 2, and this encounter features a US Army veteran who served at Fort Riggs and shares the horrors which transpired at the holding camp.
Take the load off. Fire's real warm. You're a place called Fort Riggs? South of Strawberry. Captain, Indians penned in there like cattle. I ain't know what's worse. Seeing the ones we killed or watching the other ones die. Slow way. Well, they pay well. Them government boys. But the money don't last long. It's what you did. Sticks around.
I know the feeling.
I was a young man then, but I still see them faces clear as yesterday. I do.
These were the objective material conditions that Red Dead Redemption 2's Native Americans found themselves in during 1899. They were destitute, desperate, on the run, and hopeless. Furthermore, the young Native Americans who would eventually find themselves as foot soldiers in Dutch Van Der Linde's future gang were clearly outcasts from their tribes as they roamed tall trees and the surrounding area. The most important clue regarding the massacre of the Blackwater Athletics Team isn't the crudely formed B, obviously standing for Blackwater, at the mass grave, nor is it the makeup painted on the hoods, which likely was done as to taunt those who were very distraught and terrified. The most important clue, which so obviously gives away the fact that this massacre was committed by those who would later serve Dutch Van Der Linde, were the hoods which covered the heads of the athletics team members. Dutch's gang used hoods whenever they took a hostage, and this can clearly be seen in the mission Bear One Another's Burdens in Red Dead Redemption. Moreover, by Red Dead Redemption 2's epilogue, which takes place in 1907, we know that Dutch was in tall trees by this point, as a news report in the game's newspapers features a story in which an eyewitness spotted Van Der Linde in tall trees. The massacre of the Blackwater Athletics Team is merely a reflection of the circumstances which existed in Chapter 6, specifically the turmoil between Native Americans and the US government, and the government's infringement and breaking of specific treaties. The exploitation of raw materials in pursuit of profit forced the plight of Red Dead Redemption 2's Native Americans to the wayside, without anything, including their homes, land, dignity, and way of life, into abject poverty. And for those alienated, frustrated, confused, and bloodthirsty young men who were ultimately ostracized from their tribes, they sought their vengeance against the US government and the white man whenever they could, and exacted their vengeance on whomever entered their turf. And for the Blackwater Athletics Team, they would be the victims of that cruel and brutal vengeance, resulting in yet another massacre within this conflict.